The red room waited like a secret heart in the center of their penthouse, pulsing with possibility and fear. Zainab stood outside the door for 10 minutes before she could make herself turn the handle. It had been 3 days since she'd moved back home. 3 days of careful conversations and tentative touches. 3 days of rebuilding what had almost shattered completely. But tonight was different. Tonight, she would cross a threshold she couldn't uncross. Min-jae had already gone inside to wait for her when he saw she was still tensed. He stood by the far wall, his back to her. He wore simple black pants and a turtleneck top, sleeves rolled to his elbows. When he heard her enter, he turned slowly, and the expression on his face was so raw, so vulnerable, that Zainab almost backed out. "You don't have to do this," he said immediately. "We can close this door and never open it again. I'll be content with." "Stop." Zainab held up her hand. "I came here because I want to understand you. All of you. Not the edited version you think I need. The real version." Min-jae studied her for a long moment. "This isn't just about physical acts, Zainab. It's about trust. About giving up control to someone who will keep you safe even when you're vulnerable. About pushing boundaries and discovering what you're capable of feeling. Then show me." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Teach me." "Hi, Loveliesss. This is the last part of our beautiful story, 14 Days to Love Him. Look for this video and hit that like button. Subscribe as well. That will encourage me to generate more mind-blowing stories. I'll give you a minute to do that. Now let's dive back into Zainab and Min-jae's story. As Zainab stepped into the red room, what followed was not what she expected. Min-jae didn't touch her first. Instead, he talked. He needed her to understand what she was about to do. For over an hour, he explained the psychology behind dominance and submission, the importance of consent and communication, the difference between pain and harm. He showed her the equipment in the room, explained what each piece was for, answered every question with patience and honesty. "This isn't about violence," he said, running his fingers along a length of silk rope. "It's about connection. About creating experiences so intense that everything else falls away. You and me and nothing else in the entire world." "Have you done this before?" Zainab asked. "Before me, I mean." "Yes." His honesty was brutal but necessary. "In my 20s, before I dreamed of you, I had relationships with women who understood this lifestyle. But after I saw you in my dreams, I couldn't. The thought of anyone else felt wrong. So I hired professionals for scenes that never crossed the line into intimacy. But you want intimacy with me. In this way. Only if you want it too." He moved closer, cupping her face gently. "Say your safe word right now, and we walk away. No judgment. No disappointment." Zainab had chosen her safe word 2 days ago. Hannah, their daughter's name. The most sacred thing they shared. "I'm not saying it," she whispered. "I want to try, but gently. I want to start small." Relief and desire flickered across Min-jae's face. "Then we start with trust. Close your eyes." Zainab obeyed. Immediately, her other senses heightened. She heard Min-jae moving around her, felt the air shift as he passed. Then something soft brushed across her shoulders. "Silk, I'm going to blindfold you," he said softly. "The first rule of submission is learning to exist without control. To trust that I'll keep you safe even when you can't see." "Do you trust me, Zainab?" Did she? After everything? After the kidnapping, the secrets, the lies? "Yes," she breathed, and meant it. The silk covered her eyes, blocking out the red room, blocking out everything except sensation and sound. Min-jae's hands on her shoulders, warm and sure. His breath against her ear as he spoke. "Good girl. Now, I want you to stand here and not move. I'm going to touch you, and you're going to feel everything. If it becomes too much, say your safe word. Understand?" "Yes." What followed was exquisite torture. Min-jae's fingers traced patterns on her skin, so light she could barely feel them. Then firmer, more insistent. He undressed her slowly, reverently, until she stood vulnerable in the darkness behind the blindfold. And then his hands, his mouth, exploring her body like he was discovering her for the first time. But it was different from their usual lovemaking. This was deliberate, controlled, designed to heighten every sensation until Zainab felt like she would shatter from the intensity. When she tried to touch him, he caught her wrists. "No. Tonight, you receive. You surrender. You let me worship you without trying to control anything." It was harder than she expected. Zainab was used to being in control of her life, her choices, her body. But here, blindfolded and vulnerable, She had to let go. Had to trust that Min-jae would catch her when she fell. And he did. Again and again, he brought her to the edge and pulled her back until she was trembling, pleading, begging for release. Only then did he give it to her, and the climax that followed was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional, psychological, a complete surrender that left her sobbing in his arms. "I've got you," Min-jae murmured, removing the blindfold, holding her close. "You're safe. I've got you." Zainab clung to him, overwhelmed by what she'd just experienced. That was intense, terrifying, beautiful. I don't have words. Min-jae carried her to a soft chaise in the corner, wrapping them both in a blanket. This part, he explained, was just as important as what came before. Aftercare, bringing her back to earth gently, making sure she felt safe and cherished and whole. "How do you feel?" he asked, stroking her hair. "Vulnerable, exposed, but also," she paused, searching for the right word. "Free. Like I discovered something about myself I didn't know existed." That's the gift of submission. When you give up control, you often find more freedom than you had before. They stayed like that for over an hour, talking quietly, reconnecting. And when they finally left the red room and returned to their bedroom, Zainab felt different. Not broken, as she'd feared, but transformed, expanded, like she'd discovered a new dimension of herself. The next morning, Zainab woke to find Min-jae already awake, watching her with those intense eyes that still made her heart skip. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. "No." She was surprised to realize it was true. "But I need time to process." "That was a lot." "Of course. We go at your pace. Always." They fell into a new rhythm over the following weeks. Their normal life continued during the day. Zainab worked on her fashion line. Min-jae handled his legitimate business interests. They picked Hannah up from school and had family dinners. To the outside world, they were a normal family. But at night, sometimes, they would return to the red room. And Zainab would explore this new world Min-jae had opened for her. She learned about ropes and restraints, about the pleasure that could come from carefully calibrated sensation. She discovered that she enjoyed the surrender, the trust, the intensity of being completely present with him. But she also learned her limits. Some things in that room, she tried once and knew weren't for her. And Min-jae never pushed. He accepted her boundaries with grace, telling her that knowing what you didn't want was just as important as knowing what you did. "This isn't about making you into someone you're not," he said one night, untying the ropes from her wrists with gentle precision. "It's about discovering who you already are beneath all the layers society tells you to wear." 3 months into this new chapter of their marriage, Zainab received a call that would change everything once more. It was from Nigeria. Her mother. "Your father is sick," her mother said, her voice tight with worry. "Cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say, they say we should prepare." Zainab's world tilted. Her father, the man who had taught her to be brave, who had supported her dreams even when they seemed impossible, dying. "I need to go to Lagos," she told Min-jae that night. "Then we go," he said without hesitation. "You, me, and Hannah. Your family needs you. But your business can wait. You can't." He pulled her close. "When are we leaving?" They flew to Lagos 3 days later, Hannah excited about visiting her Nigerian grandparents, Zainab terrified about what she would find. The flight was long, giving her too much time to think. About her father, about her choices, about the life she'd built in Seoul and the life she'd left behind in Lagos. When they landed, the heat hit her like a physical force. Lagos. Home. She hadn't been back in 5 years, not since she'd called David from Singapore and ended everything. Guilt, familiar and sharp, cut through her chest. Her father looked smaller than she remembered. The cancer had stolen his vitality, leaving behind a frail man who barely resembled the strong presence of her childhood. But when he saw her, his face lit up. "My daughter," he said in Hausa, his voice weak but warm. "You came home." "Of course I came home, Baba." Zainab knelt by his bed, taking his hand. "I'll always come when you need me." Her father's eyes moved to Min-jae, standing in the doorway with Hannah. "So this is the man who stole you away to Korea?" "I didn't steal her, sir," Min-jae said respectfully. "She chose to come." "Did she?" Her father's gaze was sharp despite his illness. "Or did you make the choice for her?" The room went silent. Zainab felt her heart stop. Did her father know? Had he somehow discovered the truth about how they met? "Baba," she started, but her father held up his hand. I'm dying, Zainab. I don't have time for pretty lies. Tell me the truth. Did you choose this man, or did he take that choice from you? Zainab looked at Min-jae, saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched at his sides. Then she looked back at her father. He took my choice, she said quietly. But then he gave it back. And I chose him anyway. Her father studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Love is rarely simple, but it should always be true. Is this true, my daughter? Do you truly love this man? More than anything, Baba. Except for Hannah. Then I will not stand in your way. But you. He turned to Min-jae. Come here. Min-jae approached the bed, and Zainab's father grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. You took my daughter to a foreign country. You gave her a child in a world I cannot protect her from. If you ever hurt her, if you ever make her regret choosing you, I will haunt you from my grave. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Min-jae's voice was solemn. And I swear to you, I will spend every day of my life making sure she never regrets choosing me. Her father held Min-jae's gaze for a long moment, then released him. Good. Now leave us. I want to talk to my daughter alone. After Min-jae left with Hannah, Zainab's father turned back to her. There's something wrong between you two. I can see it. What happened? And Zainab, who had never been able to lie to her father, told him everything. About the Red Room. About Min-jae's secrets. About her choice to explore this new world with him despite her fears. Her father listened without judgment, his face thoughtful. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. When I met your mother, he finally said, she was engaged to another man. A good man, approved by her family. But I loved her with a passion that terrified us both. So I asked her to run away with me. To choose uncertainty and passion over safety and approval. I never knew that. Because it's not a story we told often. People judged us. Said I corrupted her, stole her, ruined her. But your mother, she knew the truth. She chose me. Not because I forced her, but because sometimes the heart wants what the mind says is impossible. Are you saying I made the right choice? Her father smiled sadly. I'm saying there is no right choice. There's only the choice you make and whether you can live with it. Can you live with loving a man who kidnapped you? A man who kept secrets? A man who lives in violence and danger? Zainab thought about it. Really thought about it. About the past 5 years. The fear and the joy. The tears and the laughter. The nights in the Red Room and the mornings waking up beside him. The way Hannah called him daddy with absolute trust. The way he looked at her like she was his entire world. Yes, she said firmly. I can live with it. Because despite everything, he's never stopped choosing me too. Every day, in 1,000 small ways, he chooses me. Then that's all that matters. Her father squeezed her hand weakly. Live your life, Zainab. Love your impossible man. Raise your daughter in that strange world. And be happy. That's all I've ever wanted for you. They stayed in Lagos for 2 weeks. Min-jae was surprisingly comfortable in Nigeria, charming Zainab's family with his attempts at speaking Hausa, playing with Hannah and her cousins, helping around the house despite being completely out of his element. One evening, Zainab found him on the veranda, staring out at the Lagos night. She sat beside him, taking his hand. Thank you for being here, she said. Where else would I be? Your father is dying. You need me. It's more than that. Zainab leaned her head on his shoulder. You could have judged my choice to tell him the truth. You could have been angry that I exposed your secrets. But you understood why I had to. I told you. No more secrets. That means being honest even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it might cost us something. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of Lagos at night. So different from Seoul. Louder, more chaotic, vibrant with life. Do you ever regret it? Min-jae asked suddenly. Choosing me over David? Over the life you could have had here. Zainab thought about David. She'd heard through mutual friends that he'd married someone else, a Nigerian banker, safe and stable, and everything Zainab had given up. Part of her wondered what her life would have been like if she'd chosen differently. If she'd gotten on that plane back to Lagos 5 years ago and never looked back. But only a small part. Because the rest of her knew the truth. No, she said firmly. David would have given me a good life. But you've given me an extraordinary one. Terrifying, yes. Complicated, absolutely. But never boring. Never safe in the way that slowly kills your soul. Min-jae pulled her closer. I don't deserve you. Stop saying that. You have me. That's all that matters. Zainab's father passed away on their last day in Lagos. Peacefully, in his sleep, surrounded by family. Zainab held his hand and whispered that she loved him, that she would be okay, that he could rest now. The funeral was a traditional Igbo ceremony, full of color and music in celebration of a life well lived. Min-jae stood beside Zainab through all of it, supporting her when she faltered, holding Hannah when the little girl got tired, being exactly what she needed without her having to ask. Your father was right, Min-jae said on the flight back to Seoul. Hannah was asleep between them, exhausted from the trip. Love should be true. And ours is. Messy and impossible and sometimes terrifying, but true. Yes, Zainab agreed, lacing her fingers through his. It is. Back in Seoul, life settled into a new normal. Zainab's fashion line exploded in popularity after she showcased a collection dedicated to her father, blending Nigerian and Korean aesthetics in a way that critics called groundbreaking. Orders poured in from around the world. She was invited to show at Paris Fashion Week. Min-jae's legitimate business interests flourished now that he was no longer distracted by crime. He invested in technology startups, real estate, sustainable energy. The violence that had once defined his life became a distant memory, though he kept guards around their home because old enemies didn't forget easily. And at night, sometimes, they still visited the Red Room. But now it felt different. Not a secret shame, but a shared intimacy. A place where they could be completely honest with each other, completely vulnerable, completely themselves. Hannah turned 6. She started elementary school, speaking fluent Korean, English, and Hausa, a little girl caught between 3 worlds and thriving in all of them. She had her mother's confidence and her father's intensity, a combination that promised to be formidable when she grew up. One evening, 2 years after her father's death, Zainab found herself standing in front of the painting again. The massive portrait of her face that had started everything. She stared at it, marveling at how accurate it was, how Min-jae had captured her essence before ever meeting her. Do you believe in fate? She asked Min-jae, who had come to stand beside her. I used to think I created my own fate through force and will, he said. But then I dreamed you, and I realized that some things are bigger than us. Some connections transcend logic and reason. We've been married for 7 years now. 7 years since those 14 days. The best 14 days of my life, followed by the best 7 years. Zainab turned to face him fully. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air, huge and transformative. Min-jae's eyes went wide, disbelief and joy warring across his face. Pregnant? Are you sure? I took 3 tests. All positive. We're having another baby. Min-jae pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. When he finally pulled back, there were tears on his face. Another child. Another miracle. Are you happy? Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. He kissed her, deep and full of promise. You gave me everything, Zainab. A family. A purpose. A reason to be better than I was. And now you're giving me another chance to be a father. How could I be anything but ecstatic? Their son was born 8 months later. They named him Tae-won, which meant great source in Korean. From the moment they brought him home, Hannah was obsessed with her baby brother, wanting to help with everything, declaring herself his personal protector. Just like Daddy protects us, she announced seriously. I'll protect Tae-won from all the monsters. Watching his children together, watching his wife flourish in her career while building this family with him, Min-jae felt something he'd never experienced before. Complete peace. Complete belonging. Complete home. But the universe, it seemed, had one more test for them. When Tae-won was 6 months old, Zainab received a letter. It was from David, the first communication she'd had with him in 7 years. Her hands shook as she opened it. Dear Zainab, it read. I know I'm probably the last person you expected to hear from. I'm not even sure you'll read this. But I wanted you to know that I'm getting divorced. It turns out marrying someone safe wasn't the same as marrying someone right. My wife and I, we never had what you and I had. The passion, the connection, even the fights. We were comfortable together, but we were never in love. I've spent 7 years wondering what my life would have been like if I'd fought harder for you. If I'd gotten on a plane to Seoul and demanded you come home. I'm not writing to ask you to come back. I know you're married. You have children. You've built a life. I'm writing because I need to know the answer to one question. Did I lose you to someone better? Or did I just lose you because I was too much of a coward to fight? David. Zainab read the letter 3 times, her heart aching for the man she'd once loved, the life she'd chosen to leave behind. Min-jae found her like that, sitting by the window with the letter in her hands. "What is it?" he asked, seeing her expression. She handed him the letter without a word, watched him read it, saw his jaw tighten, but also saw understanding in his eyes. "Are you going to respond?" he asked carefully. "Should I?" "That's your choice. I won't stop you either way." Zainab thought about it for a long time. Then she sat down and wrote her response. "Dear David, you didn't lose me to someone better. You lost me to someone different. Someone who saw me and needed me in a way that terrified us both. You were good to me. You loved me in the best way you knew how. But Min-jae loves me in a way that feels like fate. Like the universe conspired to bring us together despite all logic and reason. You weren't a coward. You were honest. You let me go when holding on would have destroyed us both. That took courage. I hope you find someone who makes you feel the way Min-jae makes me feel. Not safe, not comfortable, but alive. Intensely, impossibly, beautifully alive. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for letting me go. Thank you for being part of my story, even though you're not part of my ending. Be well, David. Be happy. Find your own impossible love. Yours in memory, Zainab." She sent the letter and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. That chapter of her life was truly closed now. No more guilt. No more wondering. Just forward. Just the life she'd chosen and continued to choose every single day. 10 years after the 14 days that started it all, Zainab and Min-jae stood in the red room one final time. Not to sing, but to say goodbye. "I think we've outgrown this," Zainab said, looking around at the space that had once frightened her, then fascinated her, then taught her so much about herself. "You're sure?" Min-jae asked. "We don't have to give it up if you don't want to." "I'm sure. What this room taught me, I carry with me now. The trust, the vulnerability, the intensity. I don't need this space anymore to access those parts of myself." They transformed the red room into a library, lined with books in Korean, English, and Hausa, a place where their children could learn and dream. The furniture was removed, the equipment dismantled, the silk ropes and restraints donated to people who would appreciate them. But the painting stayed. That would always stay. A reminder of where they started. A prophecy fulfilled. Hannah turned 13. Beautiful, brilliant, caught between cultures but belonging to all of them. She wanted to be a fashion designer like her mother and a businesswoman like her father. She had her mother's creativity and her father's strategic mind. She was going to change the world. Taewon was 7, quiet and thoughtful, with his father's intensity and his mother's compassion. He loved books and art and asking questions that had no easy answers. He made them think, made them see the world differently. And Min-jae and Zainab, they grew old together. Not peacefully, because their love was never peaceful, but deeply, intensely, with a connection that only strengthened with time. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they returned to Singapore, to the spot where Min-jae had first seen Zainab in the flesh, where his dreams had become reality. 20 years, Zainab marveled, standing by the waterfront where she'd once stood taking pictures, innocent and unaware that her life was about to change forever. 20 years since you kidnapped me. I prefer to think of it as aggressive courting, Min-jae said, and she laughed. You're impossible. And you love me anyway. I do. She turned to face him, this man who had dreamed her, stolen her, loved her through everything. I really, really do. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd refused the 14 days? If you demanded I take you home immediately? Zainab thought about it. About the parallel life she would have lived. Safe. Stable. Ordinary. Sometimes. But then I remember that I've never been someone who chose safe. I've always chosen extraordinary, even when it terrified me. And am I? Extraordinary? You're impossible, infuriating, sometimes still terrifying. But yes, you're the most extraordinary thing that ever happened to me. Min-jae pulled her close, and they swayed together as the Singapore sun set, painting the sky in colors that reminded Zainab of her father, of Lagos, of all the places she'd been and the place she'd chosen to call home. I would dream you again, Min-jae whispered against her hair. In every lifetime, in every universe, I would dream you. And in every one, I would fight to make you real. And in every one, Zainab whispered back, I would choose you. Even knowing everything. Even knowing it would be hard and complicated and sometimes painful. I would always choose you. They stayed like that as night fell. Two souls who had found each other against all odds. who had built something impossible and made it real. The kidnapper and the captive who became the husband and the wife. The dream and the reality. The choice and the consequence. And it was beautiful. Years later, when Hannah asked her mother about how she met her father, Zainab told her a version of the truth. She told her about dreams and fate and impossible choices. She told her about 14 days that changed everything. But she left out the parts that would make her daughter afraid, focusing instead on the parts that showed her daughter what love could be. The thing about love, Zainab said, is that it's never simple. Real love is messy and complicated, and sometimes it asks you to be brave in ways you never imagined. But when you find it, when you really find it, you hold on with everything you have. Because that kind of love, the kind that transforms you, that kind only comes once. Did Daddy transform you? Hannah asked. No, baby. We transformed each other. That's what real love does. It doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you've always been, underneath all the fear. Hannah thought about this seriously. When I grow up, I want a love like yours and Daddy's. Zainab smiled, knowing that her daughter had no idea what that really meant. The fear, the secrets, the danger, the impossible beginning. But also knowing that underneath all of that was something true and real and worth every complicated moment. When you grow up, Zainab said, I hope you find a love that's uniquely yours. Not like mine, not like anyone else's, just yours. And that, in the end, was the lesson. Love wasn't about following someone else's path. It was about being brave enough to forge your own, even when that path looked nothing like what you'd imagined. Zainab had been brave. She'd stood in the middle of a highway in her mind, arms spread wide, choosing the impossible over the safe, choosing the dream over the reality she'd known, choosing transformation over comfort. And she would make that choice again, every single time. 25 years after those 14 days, Min-jae passed away peacefully in his sleep, Zainab's hand in his. He was 77 years old, and he'd lived more life in those years than most people lived in twice as long. At his funeral, Zainab stood beside the painting they'd kept all these years, the portrait of her that Min-jae had commissioned before they'd ever met. And she told their story, the real story, all of it. She told about the kidnapping, the 14 days, the choice she'd made that everyone said was insane. She told about the red room and the secrets and all the times they'd almost fallen apart. She told about the love that grew from impossible soil and flourished anyway. People will judge this story, she said, looking out at the crowd. They'll say it's wrong, that I had Stockholm Syndrome, that what he did was unforgivable. And maybe they're right. Maybe it was all of those things. But it was also love. Real, complicated, transformative love. And I wouldn't trade a single moment of it. She lived for 10 more years after Min-jae passed. 10 years of watching her children build their own lives, of spoiling her grandchildren, of continuing to design and create and build the empire she'd started all those years ago. And every night, she dreamed, not of Min-jae, though he appeared in her dreams sometimes, but of that girl standing by the waterfront in Singapore, of the moment before everything changed, of the choice she was about to make without knowing it. And in every dream, she made the same choice again. She chose love. She chose the impossible. She chose him. Because that's what brave people do. They choose, even when they're terrified, even when everyone says they're wrong, even when the path ahead looks dark and dangerous and full of unknowns. They choose, and they live with their choice, and they make it beautiful. That was Zainab's gift to her children, her grandchildren, to everyone who heard her story. The courage to choose. The bravery to love impossibly. The wisdom to know that sometimes the craziest decisions lead to the most extraordinary lives. And when she finally passed, peacefully and surrounded by love, her last thought was simple. I would do it all again. If you made it all the way to the end of this incredible 3-part journey, you are absolutely amazing. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on those notifications because you've just experienced something special. And I have so many more stories that will blow your mind. Smash that like button if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you believe in the power of impossible love. Your likes and subscribing tell me you want more stories like this. Until next time, remember, your life is your story. Write it bravely, love impossibly, choose courageously, and never apologize for the extraordinary life you build from the choices everyone said were wrong. See you in the next story. Bye, Loveliesss.